Good morning, Saints. Yesterday, I, I, I had a visit from the son-in-law. He's a little preacher man out here in a little old building assembly, like I said, in the middle of nowhere. And it was a blessing that they showed up. We were needing a water heater. And so I talked to him about if he had a charge account at Lowe's. He said no, but why don't you just let me buy it and you pay me back? And I said, okay, I guess we can do that because we just needed a water heater. So he showed up with a water heater, and I got an opportunity to sit out back and talk. I don't get to talk to a lot of people as far as me seeking counsel, so I got to talk to my son-in-law. Like I say, he's a little preacher man, and I had some issues that I need to speak to someone in a capacity of an elder. Uh, but let me say something real quick. When we agreed to pay for the water heater, pay him the payments for the water heater, my spirit was at unrest because in Scripture it says we're to owe no man nothing. Yeah, we make house payments and we pay gas and we owe people all the time, but that's people in the world. Within the kingdom, we're not supposed to owe one another. If we see a need and we can meet it, we're just supposed to meet it. And I was kind of, my spirit was at unrest. Uh, but I need to take care of the house, and so I accepted this, even though it made me uneasy. Uh, it come to be when I walked in and we looked at the old water heater. It was still just me and him private. He said, "Look, you don't owe me nothing for this water heater." And I said, "Peter, that's a lot of money." And then he explained something to me. The week prior to this, him being a little preacher man out there, his little congregation, they do things that you really don't see a lot. Somebody come up to him and gave him $500 check. I said, "Look, do something with this." A week prior to this, before he even knew I need water heater, somebody God put it on his heart, took their heart to go up to the pastor man and give him a check and say, "Hey, do something with it," because they know that Peter won't stick that in his pocket and do for himself with it. That's the type of congregation. It's pretty decent congregation, I'm gonna tell you. Um, and then this came up. Peter said, it was paid for last week. That's an amazing thing when you just sit down and realize what had happened. Now, although the water heater is a blessing to the house, what was more of a blessing was I got to speak to Peter, because I spoke on it, but I haven't got to go to get counsel from anybody, and I was just this weariness that I'm feeling all the time. So I got some scriptures pulled up here. Let me get over here, and we're gonna pull them up, and we're gonna read them. Uh, let me find them. Okay, the very first one that deals with uh, one who is a servant in the kingdom of God is it said, "Let us not be weary in well doing. For in due season," and that is when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ, "in due season we shall reap if we faint not." In other words, if we don't quit. Now that means quit. That don't mean that you get hindered and you got to take a break. It means if we faint not, if we stop doing. So let us not grow weary in what. Now I talked to Peter about this, and this is what we spoke on. A lot of people, they say, "Well, I don't understand what it means to get weary." And the reason is they're just living in the world. They're not being a servant in the kingdom. They're just living their lives in the days of Noah. But let me tell you something. If you are really a participant in this well doing, You there'll be times that you get weary. The Lord God got weary. He even said, "Look, y'all stay." He had to separate from the ones he loved, James and John and Peter. Y'all stay over here. I've got to have this alone with the Father. See, he grew weary. Paul grew weary. We will grow weary, but it says, "Let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not." Does that mean that getting weary is a sin? No. It's let us not be. That's a continuation of it. That's just living in weariness. Now that's in Galatians, and it's speaking also in the matter of old law and stuff, because we got to remember Galatians was written to converted Israelites, but some of this is profitable for us in our gospel as well, uh, because it is written by Paul, who gives us our gospel. So let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him, teach it in all good things. See, that's wanting well done thing. Let him that is taught in the world communicate unto him that teacheth in all good things. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man soweth, that shall also he reap. For he that soweth to his flesh, but of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit, of the Spirit reap life everlasting, which we know life everlasting is to know the one true God. It's not a time period of life. So what is speaking of here is the sowing to the flesh, and that was the old Mosaic laws, those old rudiments of the world that says don't get snared back up in those old things. We sow into the Spirit. We're totally different now in the new covenant, as we have therefore opportunity. Let us do good to all. And it says all. Man is italicized, meaning that wasn't really there in the originals. Do good unto all, especially unto them who are in the household of faith. Now, and this is, you don't see this in too many areas either. Paul says something here. Ye see how large a letter I have written to you with mine own hand. Now, a lot of times Paul had things scribed. But this one here, Paul says, hey, I wrote you, this is how I wrote with my own hand. So, as many as desire to make a fair show in the flesh, they constrain you to be circumcised. See, remember, now we're talking earlier about this is speaking to the converted Israelites, and they're still saying that, some of them saying that we got, if you sow to the flesh, in other words, as many as desire to make your show in the flesh, that constrain you to be circumcised, only at least they should suffer persecution for the cross of Christ. See? If in this instance here, Paul speaks on those are saying, look, you have to be circumcised along with grace. A lot of them was in Acts 15. We see was still teaching the entirety book of Moses. You got to keep the commandments, and that is what Paul is saying. Let us not do weary in well doing, sowing to the flesh. In other words, remember, word Israelites, so he's speaking specifically to them on some issues of the old Mosaic law being sowed, thinking they're going to reap something. But now, we also understand this, and I can understand a converted Israelite coming out of the law and grow weary in not observing the laws anymore, because this is part of it's like in their blood. And wanting to bring back things like circumcision. I can understand that. See, that would be like us as converted Gentiles wanting to bring in some old ways that makes us feel closer to God or holier. Now we see Paul speak on that when he talks about the head coverings for the woman, no head covering for the man, shaving the head of the woman. It's a shame for long hair. All these customs they was trying to bring in. And Paul said we don't have no such customs in the house of God, the church of God. So this is let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season, and we know that's the season to come. if we faint not. Now, in well doing, this was the question that I spoke with my son in law, the little pastor man. It says that we don't, well, let me read it. Let me read it. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high. So, a lot of that people believe that speaks only of, okay, I'll use an example, because we were speaking about me and my wife. And I said, if I'm not fighting her flesh, because it said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, so I'm not wrestling her, my wife. I wrestle against principalities, so I'm wrestling against all this evilness, this wickedness, spiritual wickedness in high. So a lot of people, that does not mean that my wife is wicked. That's not speaking. I'm not wrestling. When it said we wrestle not against flesh and blood, I'm not. That's not speaking of. I don't wrestle against my wife. She's flesh and blood. It's speaking of me wrestling my flesh and blood. I don't wrestle my flesh and blood. Now we're gonna get into another portion of this in a minute, because flesh is an interesting thing when it talks about our own. We don't. Now I want you to understand, we don't. So what goes on? Because other scripture said let me go over here, and I'll come back to this one here. What is that? So that's Ephesians 6:12. Let me go here. For the flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to the other, so you cannot do the things that ye would. Now remember, this was converted Israelite letter, and it speaks on some lawish things, but it also is profitable for us in knowing that this, my flesh wrestle against my spirit, the Spirit of God. My flesh does not wrestle, does not lust against the other spirits. It desires it. It desires it. So the flesh lusts against the spirit, but when it comes to those things in the world, well, my flesh just don't lust against it, they lust for it. And the spirit against the flesh. Okay, so see, that shows us, let's go back to the Ephesians one here on the armor of God. This is why we need the armor of God. Because see, I cannot wrestle against my flesh in the flesh. Can't do it. Can't do it. I need what? I need the armor of God. And we you put on this armor of God, and people use it like I just did. We put on it. We should never take it off. Once we get suited up for battle, it's battle every day. For some. For others, it's like they hang the armor up except for on certain days. And then they'll get it out of the closet and they'll shine it up real pretty and they put it on. And then when they're done with the battle, they'll put it up. Do you know in the military, I was an old military boy. In the military, you know, when I went into a situation to where we were being trained in like live maneuvers, you know what I never did? I always had my weapons with me. I always had my helmet on, my radio, my canteen, my rifle, my pistol, my compass. I had all that stuff on me at all times. It was only when I wasn't in those live fire maneuvers that we would take the gun and put it in the armor, and I wouldn't have to touch it, and all my stuff would hang up in the closet. That's a lot of way a lot of Christians do. Excuse me. That's a lot of way a lot of saints do in their life. They think they can just hang it up. And brothers and sisters, we're in battle 24/7, just about, really. I mean, even when we sleep, think about things we dream about. So, you know, we need to wake up and capture them thoughts even then. So we're in battle all the time. But this is the thing. It's not that when it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, it's not speaking that I wrestle against my wife, that flesh and blood. What it's speaking of is my flesh. I don't wrestle against my flesh and blood. I wrestle against the wickedness in high places that can speak to me, that can create a situation that I enter into if I'm not careful, if I don't see them police caution lines. God says sin's waiting at the door. See, it's mine. And then we see Paul say this as well. Because, Paul said we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. But here he said, but I keep under my body and bring, this is 1 Corinthians 9:27, but I keep under my body and bring it unto subjection, lest by any means when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Well, that's just a portion. But, so, does Paul wrestle against flesh and blood? Absolutely, his body. But I keep my body and bring it under subjection, lest by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Now, does he wrestle against that? No, he says he keeps his body and bring unto subjection. Remember, we submit ourselves to God. Resist the devil, and he'll flee. That's them wicked in high places. That's the devil. We submit to God. Resist the devil, and he flees. See, I bring my body under subjection. Who? To God. He submits to God. He prayed that one time, just take that one messenger of Satan away from him. Somebody was just talking trash about Paul. And it got so bad, Paul prayed. He said 3 times, Lord, will you do something about this guy? Lord, will you do something about this guy? I want to go over and just throat throttle him. Lord, will you please get this guy out of my life? He said, my grace is sufficient to you. My grace, divine intervention. My grace, the armor of God. That with prayer is sufficient for you. So was he battling that messenger of Satan because that was a flesh and blood? No, he said we don't wrestle flesh and blood. But in himself as well, it says he does battle, flesh battle, spirit. I keep my body, bring it under subjection. So this is the thing. I finally spoke this morning to my wife, and I told her some of the things. I said I wasn't going to do it yesterday, but she's just my wife. She's not going to let up. I love her for that because she wants to hear. She wants to know. So I finally told her this is what we talked about. And if you was to listen to the words, this is what you would hear. Me pointing a finger at her saying you. But that's not what my words spoke. Because amongst those words, it was this. It breaks my heart that I feel that I feel this way. It breaks my heart that I'm growing weary. It breaks my heart. And I ain't got nobody to talk to about it. See, it's not that I want her to get up and start doing all the things that I do in the house. That's not the case. It's what a lot of people would hear. The whole speaking was to my son-in-law the other day was this. I'm getting tired of feeling this way. I shouldn't feel this way. And I feel this way when I become weary. And then that's when I have to gird up my shoes. It says, oh my God, I have to gird them up. Make sure they on tight. Check that helmet. Gotta make sure my breastplate's on. It's not the things that I do in the house, and it's not the things that she doesn't do in the house. She knows this because I've told her this. To me, she's a blessing in that manner because I don't really have anyone to serve as far as like serve here, and this nobody. It's just me and her. My pain, my weariness comes when I start feeling weary. That's where my pain comes. That's why I said do not grow weary, because pain will make us do one or two things. We will either get stronger and overcome that pain, or we'll give up. Be not weary in well doing, we'll reap in due season if we faint not. See, a lot of them faint not, and they sell out. You know, I was talking to a brother the other day. I know some people. Now, just listen, just imagine, and this can happen. God could do this if these people would submit to Him. There's some people out here in the social media that have some grand followings, has a large platform. One of them is a brother called Marcus Rogers. I've listened to Marcus on and off for years when he was in the military and he got in trouble for wearing the uniform in the video. They told me couldn't. That's how long I've known Marcus Rogers. Also, we have these people like Benny Hinn and John MacArthur and all these other folks. Even this guy over the Samaritan Purse, what's his name? Billy Graham's son, whatever his name is. And this Ray something that uses the Ten Commandments on the street to show that everybody's a sinner. Uh, Ray Comfort. Just think for a moment if they got off the worldly things and started strictly speaking unto the perfecting of the saints and teaching our gospel. Because much as I love Brother Marcus, he's all about the flavor of the week. What latest rapper is doing this and doing that. And the COVID thing, I'm so sick of this COVID thing, and I know it's not going away. Uh, should to be or not to be? Should we take the shot or not take the shot? To be or not to be? All that crap. It's the flavor of the week. I spoke on that, but get caught up in the flavor of the week now. Just think if Marcus could stop and just start speaking our gospel. First thing he would do, he would lose a lot of people because they like the flesh he speaks on. The government and all the such junk that feeds their flesh. As soon as he stopped doing that and started feeding the spirit, they would leave. Yeah, they get tired of that after a while. There'd be some that stay. But just think if we just stopped all that nonsense, the Buddha just start speaking our gospel. Okay, let's go with this uh, the Samaritan Purse dude, Billy Graham's son. Man don't need money. Really, he don't. And he takes a salary from the Samaritan Purse. You know he's taking money out of the mouths of the people that they supposed to be helping. Well, it says the ox needs to eat from the trough. Yeah, when the ox is hungry, believe me, he ain't hungry. He's worth millions and millions and millions. Got a big house, fancy cars. This man has no need to take any money whatsoever, not one red cent, to this organization called the Samaritan Purse. Let's talk about these other ones, like Benny Hinn. If he'd stop putting "you're healed" and all that junk and actually started preaching the gospel instead of putting on a circus performance, see? If we would just think what might happen, what might happen. But hey, what it is, they got weary in doing some things and they sold out. They sold out. Majority of them preach another Jesus, another gospel. Oh yeah, they do. And another spirit. Oh yes, they do. So, growing weary. Is it a sin to grow weary? No. It is a sin to faint. Because brothers and sisters, like the little pastor son-in-law of mine said, if you're working in the kingdom of God, and I mean working, not on the sideline with the pom-pom cheerleading. If you're in the trenches working, laboring, running that race daily, you will get weary. Now, this is the thing. You gotta have someone to talk to. And you can't talk to just anybody because not everybody is in that labor field, that labor force. Not everybody's running that race. Not everybody's out there doing that. So they will never understand what it means to be weary. What you have to do is like I did. I got blessed. Somebody came here that understood what it meant to grow weary. So remember this. When it says we do not fight flesh and blood, that's not speaking of my or who we're fighting. Cause my wife in there, we're around 24/7. You can rest assured. Her fight me, I fight her at times, but we're not fighting each other flesh and blood. We're fighting wickedness in high places. How do we fight that fight? We bring our body under submission by submitting to God, resisting the devil. How do we approach that battle? We make sure that we have got on the full armor of God. The full armor of God. If I go to the battlefield with just my helmet on and my sword, I'm most likely going to get my butt kicked because I don't have my breastplate on, which protects all my vital parts. I've got my helmet on, yeah, I'm protecting my mind, but my heart is in danger. See how that works? So, hey, I love y'all. Praying for you all the time, and I'll see y'all next time around, okay?